They called me poor. Right there in front of everyone at my cousin's wedding. The words sliced through the air like a blade. People laughed. Eyes narrowed, whispers grew louder. And for a moment I wondered why I had even shown up at all. If you've ever been underestimated just because of how you look, you'll understand exactly how this feels. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss these unforgettable stories that show what true strength really looks like. The wedding hall was draped in golden fabric, chandeliers casting a glittering glow across the room. Laughter rang out, expensive perfume filled the air, and servers weaved in and out carrying silver trays piled high with delicacies. It was the kind of wedding people in our family had always dreamed about. Glamorous, loud, unapologetically extravagant. And me? I stood there at the entrance, clutching the strap of my old handbag and wearing the only decent dress I owned. It wasn't torn, it wasn't dirty. It was just simple. Plain navy fabric with clean lines. No sequins, no designer label, no matching accessories. My shoes were worn, the polish faded from too many years of use. But they were mine and I thought that would be enough. Apparently I was wrong. Look who finally decided to show up. My cousin Madison's voice rang out, dripping with disdain. She stood near the groom's table, her hair styled to perfection, glittering in diamonds, her designer gown shimmering under the lights. Claire, did you forget this is a wedding, not a charity banquet? The crowd around her erupted in muffled chuckles. Some didn't even bother hiding it. My cheeks burned hot, but I forced a small smile, pretending not to hear. But Madison wasn't done. She never was. Oh wait, no, she continued, tilting her head, feigning sympathy. I guess this is what you can afford. At least you tried. Another ripple of laughter swept through the group. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. My stomach twisted, but I kept walking, refusing to let them see how deep her words had cut. I found a seat near the back, far from the main tables, far from the spotlight. The whispers followed me like shadows. Can you believe she showed up like that? I heard she's just a waitress now. She could have borrowed something nicer. Doesn't she have any shame? Each word stung. I fixed my gaze on the centerpiece in front of me. Roses arranged so perfectly they almost looked fake. My throat tightened, but I swallowed the pain down. Because the truth was they didn't know me. Not really. None of them knew the nights I'd stayed awake, working double shifts to pay off my mother's hospital bills. None of them knew I had covered Madison's college tuition once when her financial aid fell through, quietly wiring the money so she wouldn't drop out. None of them knew that the reason my clothes were so plain was because I had chosen to pay rent for a struggling single mom I barely knew instead of buying myself a new dress. But why would they care? In this world, appearances meant everything. And in their eyes, I was nothing but the poor cousin. The ceremony went on. Music swelled, laughter filled the room, and I sat there invisible, clutching the fabric of my dress under the table, willing myself not to cry. When dinner was served, I moved quietly to the buffet, keeping my head down. As I scooped a small portion of food onto my plate, two bridesmaids stepped beside me, whispering loud enough for me to hear. "Do you think she even belongs here?" one said, smirking. "Honestly, she looks like she wandered in from the street," the other replied. They laughed, clinking their glasses together before sauntering off. I wanted to disappear. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I carried my plate back to my lonely table and stared at the food I no longer had any appetite for. Across the room, Madison basked in the glow of admiration. She was the star, the jewel, the success story. And she loved nothing more than making me feel like the opposite. At one point our eyes met. She smirked, then turned to whisper something in the groom's ear. He chuckled, glancing at me before shaking his head. I didn't need to guess what she'd said. The humiliation was written all over their faces. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe. The pain clawed at my chest, threatening to drown me. But somewhere deep down a voice whispered, "Stay calm. Your worth is not defined by them." The night dragged on, every laugh, every insult another reminder of how little I mattered to them. But I stayed. Maybe because leaving would have meant they had won. Maybe because part of me still believed there was more to this night than humiliation. And I was right. Because while everyone else saw me as nothing, someone in that room saw me differently. Someone powerful enough to silence them all. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. For now I sat there, quiet, invisible, waiting for the night to unfold. The music shifted to a louder beat as people filled the dance floor. Laughter echoed through the hall, champagne glasses clinked together, and I sat quietly in my chair, trying to make myself invisible. Every so often, a family member or guest would glance in my direction, their eyes lingering just long enough to remind me I didn't belong. I watched Madison swirl across the floor, her gown sparkling as she moved. She was radiant, confident, adored by everyone in the room. And then there was me, plain quiet, sitting in the shadows. At one point my aunt passed by my table. She leaned down just enough to whisper in my ear, "Claire, couldn't you at least have tried harder tonight? It's your cousin's big day. People are talking." Then she straightened, plastered on a smile, and glided away as though nothing had happened. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. People were talking, as if I hadn't already heard every cruel whisper in the room. I put the fork down and folded my hands in my lap, staring at the floor. My chest felt heavy, as though every insult had piled up inside me, pressing down until I could barely breathe. And yet, I stayed, because walking out would have meant surrender, and I wasn't ready to do that. The night wore on and the insults didn't stop. A group of Madison's friends passed by my table giggling. One of them muttered, "Did you see her shoes? I swear I had a pair like that in high school." Another one laughed. "Honestly, I think I donated those exact ones to charity years ago." They didn't even lower their voices. I clenched my fists under the table, nails biting into my palms. Still, I didn't look up. I thought back to all the sacrifices I had made. The long hours, the quiet acts of kindness no one knew about. I thought about the night I walked home from work in the pouring rain because I couldn't afford a cab, only to give my last $20 to a homeless man who needed it more than I did. I thought about the scholarship fund I had helped raise for underprivileged kids at the community center, the extra shifts I'd taken to support causes that mattered to me. But none of it mattered here. Not to them. All they saw was the dress, the shoes, the simplicity that made me an easy target. And then, just as I was starting to believe this night would never end, the energy in the room shifted. The double doors at the far end of the hall swung open. A hush fell across the crowd. Even the music seemed to fade as people turned their heads. Whispers spread like wildfire. "He's here. Oh my God, is that really him? I didn't know he was coming." I looked up, following their gaze. A tall man walked into the room, his presence commanding attention without him saying a word. His silver hair caught the light, his dark suit tailored to perfection. There was something about the way he carried himself, calm, steady, powerful. I recognized him instantly. Judge William Harrington. The judge. He wasn't just a guest. He was one of the most respected figures in the state, known for his unwavering integrity and his ability to see through lies and pretenses. His name carried weight. His words carried power. As he entered, the crowd shifted, making way for him. Madison's groom hurried over, bowing slightly as he extended his hand. "Judge Harrington, we're so honored you could make it," he said, his voice almost trembling with respect. The judge nodded politely, shaking his hand before scanning the room. His eyes moved slowly across the crowd, lingering on faces, reading the room without a single word. Then, to my shock, his gaze landed on me. For a split second our eyes locked. I froze. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. His expression softened, and something like a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He took a step forward, then another, moving through the crowd. People whispered louder now, confusion and curiosity buzzing in the air. "Why is he walking over there? Who's that girl? Is he going to her?" I sat frozen in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to sink into the floor, to disappear, but it was too late. Judge Harrington was walking straight toward me. Madison noticed too. She frowned, her hand tightening on the groom's arm. "Why is he going to Claire?" she hissed under her breath. But the judge didn't stop until he stood right in front of me. For a moment the entire room went silent. "Claire." His voice was warm, certain, as though he had no doubt who I was. I blinked, stunned. "Why, yes, sir." And then, in front of everyone, he extended his hand. "It's good to see you again." Gasps rippled through the room. People craned their necks, whispering louder now. "What? He knows her. Wait, what's going on? Did he just say it's good to see her again?" Madison's face went pale. her perfect smile faltering for the first time all night. The groom stared in disbelief. My aunt's glass nearly slipped from her hand. But the judge wasn't done. "You know," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "this young woman is someone I deeply respect. She may not brag about what she's done, but I will never forget it." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room was on us. My heart raced, my palms sweaty. But for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: validation. The judge turned slightly, addressing the crowd. "You should all know, this woman is no ordinary guest. She is the reason I was able to—" He paused, his eyes scanning the stunned audience, as though deciding how much to reveal. And in that moment I knew everything was about to change. The laughter, the mockery, the whispers, they were about to be silenced. Because while my cousin and her friends saw me as nothing, the judge saw me as something else entirely. And soon everyone would know the truth. For a long, breathless moment, no one in the hall spoke. All eyes were fixed on the judge, standing tall in front of me, his hand extended as though I were someone important, someone worthy of respect. I hesitated, then slowly placed my trembling hand into his. His grip was firm, steady, and warm. It grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. He looked me directly in the eye, his voice strong but filled with emotion. "Claire, you once stood by me when no one else would. I will never forget that." A wave of whispers rippled across the room. "What does he mean? Claire? Stood by him? What is going on?" Madison's face twisted, her smile now gone completely. She looked from me to the judge, her eyes narrowing with confusion and disbelief. The judge turned, addressing the crowd so his words carried to every corner of the hall. "Years ago," he said, "I found myself in a moment of weakness. I was on the verge of losing hope, drowning in the weight of my responsibilities. No one saw it, no one cared, except for her." He gestured toward me. My heart pounded, my palms damp, my throat tight. I had no idea what he was going to say. He continued, "Claire didn't know who I was. She didn't care about my title, my influence, or my position. She just saw a man who needed kindness. She offered me compassion when the world offered me nothing. And that single act reminded me of the humanity I was about to give up on." A stunned silence followed his words. I remembered that day vividly. The night I walked home in the rain and stopped to help a stranger sitting on a bench, drenched, alone, and exhausted. I had given him my umbrella and half of the sandwich I'd packed for work the next day. We never exchanged names. I never expected to see him again. And now here he was, Judge Harrington. The room erupted into murmurs. People leaned in to whisper to each other, eyes darting between me and the judge. Madison finally found her voice. "That's ridiculous," she spat. "She's exaggerating. She couldn't possibly mean that much to someone like you." The judge's head snapped toward her, his eyes cold and sharp. "Young lady," he said firmly, "you should learn when to hold your tongue. Respect is not measured in wealth or gowns or the number of guests applauding you. It is measured in the choices you make and the lives you touch. And Claire has touched mine in a way you clearly cannot understand." The color drained from Madison's face. Her friends stared at her in shock, as though seeing her true nature for the first time. The groom's jaw tightened, and even he seemed to pull slightly away from her. And then, to everyone's astonishment, the judge did something no one expected. He bowed to me. Gasps filled the hall. People stood, chairs scraping against the polished floor as they craned to see. The sight of a man as powerful and respected as Judge Harrington bowing to someone like me left them speechless. My chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes. For years I had been overlooked, underestimated, laughed at. And now, in front of all of them, I was seen. Truly seen. "Claire," he said, straightening, "you may not realize it, but your kindness changed me. And I want everyone in this room to know, this young woman is a role model. A reminder that dignity is not found in luxury, but in compassion." The crowd erupted. Some clapped, others whispered apologies under their breath for the way they had treated me earlier. Even those who had mocked me seemed suddenly ashamed of their words. I glanced at Madison, and for once she was speechless. The smug superiority she had carried all night was gone, replaced by a look of fear that her cruelty had been exposed. For the first time in my life I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful, not because of money or status, but because someone had finally recognized the strength I had carried all along. The judge placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Never let anyone make you feel less than who you are," he said softly. "You have more value than they'll ever understand." Tears slipped down my cheeks, but for once they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of relief, of validation, of pride. The night moved on, but nothing was the same. Guests who had ignored me now approached with hesitant smiles, offering apologies and asking about my life. My aunt, red-faced and humbled, muttered something about not realizing how special I was. Even Madison's groom looked at me differently, as though questioning everything he thought he knew about the woman he had just married. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something greater. The knowledge that who I was, kind, resilient, and true, was enough. More than enough. As the judge departed, he squeezed my hand one last time and whispered, "Keep being who you are, Claire. The world needs more of you." And with that, he was gone, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than any insult ever could. I walked out of the wedding that night with my head held high, not because of the whispers or the apologies, but because I finally understood my worth. And for the first time, I knew I didn't need anyone else's approval to shine. So if you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or made to feel invisible, remember this. You don't need to prove yourself to people who can't see your value. Just keep being you. Because someday when it matters most, the truth will speak louder than the lies. And trust me, the moment it does, everyone will know who you really are. So if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And drop a comment telling me about a time you proved someone wrong. I'd love to hear your story.